Whole life orders are a significant aspect of the UK justice system, reserved for the most heinous of crimes. These sentences mean that the convicted person will spend the rest of their life in prison without the possibility of parole, with some of this country's most infamous criminals and some of those whose crimes have faded from public consciousness. There has been a total of 116 handed out, with 89 of these still alive and serving time behind the bars of UK's most notorious prisons. This series will examine those 112 men and 4 women, their lives, motives, crimes, captures, trial, and life in prison. Welcome to No Parole, Britain's Lifers. And where else to start than the first ever whole life sentence and Britain's longest serving prisoner, serial killer John Straffan. Straffan was born on the 27th of February 1930 in Borden Camp in Hampshire, an army barracks in the south of England around 50 miles from London. His father, John Sr., was serving in the British Army then. John spent the first 2 years of his life growing up in the barracks alongside his 2 older siblings. In 1932, John's father was posted to British-ruled India. Not much is known about the Straffans' life during this time. They, however, returned to England in March 1938. His father was discharged from the army and settled in Bath, an idyllic English city, famous for its Roman baths. A few months after returning to the UK, John did not waste time being a nuisance to his disciplinary father and doting mother. These boyish exuberances that most may write off landed John, aged 7, in front of juvenile court for stealing a purse. He was sentenced to 2 years probation, a chance given by the courts to buck up his ideas. This was the start of John's hatred for authority. During this time, John's probation officer noticed something off about young Straffan. He struggled with right and wrong, the limits of his probation sentencing, and struggled to adhere to the rules laid out as part of his sentence. The Straffans lived in a crowded lodgings. These modest homes could have upwards of 3 families stuffed into one house. Because of this, John's mother had no time to keep an eye on her troublesome 7-year-old. The probation officer took it on himself to try and get this misguided young man some help. An honest and good thing to do. He took John to a psychiatrist in Bath Town. The psychiatrist ran a series of tests on John, and he found him to struggle with many basic tasks well below other boys in his age bracket. This term is now obviously outdated, but he was certified as a mental defective when he was 10 years old. He was subject to an IQ test, putting his IQ at 58 and the equivalent of a mental age of 6. Shortly after this, John was taken to St Joseph's in Sambourne, Warwickshire, a school for mentally defective children. This school was 90 miles from his parents during the height of World War II. A scary enough proposition for any young child, 119 high-grade, mentally defective boys joined John in the walls of St Joseph. From my research, it was being quoted that violence was normalised in the walls of the school, from the other boys to each other, but also from the teachers. Other smaller boys, unable to fight, would go hungry and bigger bullies would snatch food. Silence was the most important thing at St Joseph's, so grassing on your bullies would have been a mandate for extreme punishment and isolation. John spent 2 years there before moving to Besford Court, a school nearby. Other students paid little notice to John, a strange child who preferred to spend time by himself, in his own world, and would rarely make himself known to the other kids in the playground. That was until John did make himself quite infamous in the school, having been suspected of strangling 2 geese. He left at age 16 with no qualifications, an estimated IQ of 64, and a mental age of 9 years old. Throughout his time here, it was noted that John's issues with authority were frequent, and the few times he spoke up was in the objection of being told what to do by an authority figure. John returned to the only place he knew, Bath, where he took several small jobs. He was still provided certification from doctors as mentally deficient. John eventually found a job in a clothing factory as a machinist. Straffan at this time started breaking into unoccupied homes and stealing items from them. In July 1947, John's crimes escalated with the assault of a 13-year-old girl, placing his hand over her mouth and looking deep into her eyes and saying, "What would you do if I killed you? I've done it before. The girl ran home to her father, saying a boy named John had grabbed her and spoken horrible words to her. Police at the time were unable to connect the crime to Straffen, only later being linked. Shortly after, John further tormented the girl and her family by strangling 5 chickens in their garden. He was arrested for burglary and confessed in his police interview. He was remanded in custody and sent to Hortham Colony in Bristol due to his diagnosis under the Mental Deficiency Act. Hortham was an open colony, a prison that specialised in the rehabilitation of mentally disabled offenders. As his crime was only burglary, he was designated by doctors as not of violent or dangerous propensities. Much like his time in school, he was an isolated individual and behaved well enough to get a transfer to lower security hostel in Winchester. Here, however, he struggled, being caught stealing walnuts and sent back to Hortham Colony. The troubles continued when he went home to Bath without leave and resisted police when they went to pick him up. This led to 1951, when John was examined at Bristol Hospital by a specialist in the new technology, electroencephalography, or EEG, a recording of spontaneous electrical activity of the brain. This is used today in epilepsy diagnosis. The reading showed that John had suffered severe damage to his cerebral cortex. It is theorised that this is from his time in India with his father at age 6, contracting encephalitis. John was given leave and went home to Bath, getting a job at a local farm. Hortham Colony gave John over to his mother as the house had become less crowded and she was able to provide some supervision to John. At this time, John's mental age was assessed to be 10 years old. On the morning of this assessment, a 7-year-old girl, Christine Butcher of Windsor, had headed into the town centre to get a glimpse of her hero, Sugar Ray Robinson, ahead of his fight with Randy Turpin. Sugar Ray was staying at the Star and Garter Hotel. Christine had planned to join the throngs of crowds and even brought her favourite doll to show him, as she believed it looked like him. But Christine would not make it to see her idol and was found by local police just near the royal family residence of Windsor Castle, at the same time that Sugar Ray was knocked out in what was considered a major upset by Randy Turpin. Christine had been raped and strangled with the belt of her raincoat she had last been seen wearing before she vanished. Her doll was found nearby. This led to the largest ever investigation for the county of Berkshire and a media frenzy, with Sugar Ray being quoted as saying, "I'm very sorry about this. If I had known she'd wanted to see me, her daddy could have brought her here, and this would have never happened." The public outrage and lack of justice by the police was noticed by Straffen, who noted that this strangling of young girls sure did cause a lot of trouble for the police. The police, who since his childhood had been the epitome of authority he had despised, from his time in school to his time in prison. He knew what he could do to cause the chaos he desired. On the 15th of July, 1951, John went to catch the latest picture at the cinema, Shockproof, starring Cornel Wilde and his then-wife, Patricia Knight. On the way to the cinema, he passed by number 1 Camden Crescent, where 5-year-old Brenda Goddard gathered flowers, maybe for her foster parents who she lived with. Straffen lured the girl from the safety of her home, as he said he knew a place for the most beautiful flowers. Brenda agreed, and John lifted her over the garden fence and onto a tree stump. She fell, hitting her head on a nearby rock. She was knocked unconscious, and at this point, John saw his sick opportunity to cause trouble for the police he despised. Much like Christine Butcher in Windsor, he strangled Brenda, making no attempt to hide the body for it to be discovered by a passerby as he continued on his way to the cinema and then returned home. Straffen was considered a suspect immediately. However, not the top suspect, as he had shown no sign of a violent nature. He was interviewed and questioned. The police even went to his workplace to try and gain an idea of his movements that day. This led to John being fired from his job at the farm. 2 weeks later, August 8th, John went to the same cinema he'd gone to after his previous murder and met 9-year-old Cicely Bastion. He coerced her to join him at another cinema with promises of the best films in town. Cicely followed him, getting on the bus and going to the outskirts of Bath. Again, John strangled Cicely, making no efforts to hide the body. Suspicions were immediately pointed towards John, even before the body was discovered, as people had seen John leading the young girl around. The bus conductor, the young couple in the adjacent field, and even a policeman's wife noted it was strange and alerted her husband and led him straight to the 9-year-old Cicely's body. John was immediately arrested the same morning and admitted to the murder of Cicely and nonchalantly confessed to the murder of Brenda Goddard. The other girl, I did her the same. At Taunton Assize Court on the 17th of October 1951, Strafford stood trial for murder before Mr. Justice Oliver. However, the only witness to be heard was Peter Parks, a medical officer at the Hornfield prison who testified to Strafford's medical history and stated his conclusions that Strafford was unfit to plead. Oliver commented, "In this country, we do not try people who are insane. You might as well try a baby in arms. If a man cannot understand what is going on, he cannot be tried." The jury formally returned a verdict that Strafford was insane and unfit to plead. Strafford was interred at the Notorious Broadmoor Hospital, a former insane asylum. Strafford took a job as a cleaner in Broadmoor and was given a relative amount of freedom. Because of this, he used this to his advantage to escape on the 29th of April 1952. John scaled the 10-foot wall by climbing onto the roof of a shed and jumping to freedom, and to seek out more chaos. He stripped from his prison uniform to reveal his civilian clothes, making his way unabated to Farley Hill, 7 miles from Broadmoor. During this time, he came across 5-year-old Linda Bauer on a spring bike ride around the neighbourhood. John would attack, strangle, and kill Linda before being recaptured. Bauer's body was discovered the next morning. Police questioned John, with him claiming, "I did not kill that little girl on the bicycle." Police had not mentioned the bicycle, and news had not reached the public or other members of staff at Broadmoor. He was charged with Linda's murder and held in Brixton Prison, as Broadmoor was seen as unfit to hold him due to his recent escape. The trial led to Strafford being deemed mentally fit, as he understood that the murder was wrong, as according to him, it was one of the commandments. The jury heard all the evidence and retired for 1 hour, examining the returned verdict of guilty, as well as John Strafford as sane. The judge sentenced John to death. John made numerous appeals against the verdict, and all were dismissed. The date of execution was set for September 4th, but was reprieved by the Queen. John was moved to Wandsworth Prison in 1952. In 1956, John was moved to Horfield after officers had discovered an escape attempt by prisoners who intended to take Strafford with them and unleash him on the local area to serve as a distraction as they escaped. While in Horfield, John shared the prison with former politician Peter Baker, who was quoted as saying on John, "Being much taller than anyone else and wearing distinct clothing for a special watch prisoner. He was a long, emaciated, miserable figure. He looked like a dying butterfly or a caged animal." In 1968, John was transferred to Durham Prison's top security E-Wing, where he was housed alongside Ian Brady. Crime author Jonathan Goodman wrote that the shambling lunatic, Strafford, is in prison only because no mental institution is secure enough to guarantee his confinement. Many years later, a prison officer recalled seeing Strafford circling the fence and banging every couple of minutes. And that one fellow officer described him as aloof and hostile. Never talks unless he has to ask for something. He's always on his own. During Strafford's time in prison, the Home Secretary had to agree to the release of any prisoner serving a life sentence. Not a single Home Secretary was willing to even fathom the idea of John Strafford being released. In 1994, the then Home Secretary, Michael Howard, compiled a list of 20 prisoners who would never ever be released under any circumstances due to their danger to the public. Strafford was on that list. Strafford died in Franklin Prison in County Durham, aged 77, in November 2007, after serving 55 years, 3 months, 26 days, or a total of 20,206 days. Strafford was the UK's longest serving prisoner, and he was one of the UK's no parole whole life orders. Thank you for joining us here at So It Goes Productions, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. Feel free to click on the playlist in the video to continue with the rest of the series. And thank you for watching.